two states can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. The definitions are extremely relevant. The devil is in the detail. But certainly the international community is saying to the Prime Minister, that's the only viable solution that we see. What surprises me is that Netanyahu is not saying the same thing, and that's because of domestic coalition considerations. But I think it's very unfortunate, because for decades it was Israel's plea to the Palestinians, you need to accept our right to be here, you need to accept Israel, the state of Israel, and your aspirations should be alongside rather than instead of Israel. And we're still waiting for them. I think there are many people who feel that Palestinians have never truly committed to a two-state solution in which Israel continues to be a majority Jewish state alongside a Palestinian state. That we are allowing a perception to expand that we're not committed to this is because there are people on the right of the coalition who don't want to relinquish sizable parts of Judea and Samaria and who don't appear to internalize the danger of losing Israel as a democracy and/or as a Jewish majority state. But I would hope that the Prime Minister's interest remains what it always was, what his stated position was. I don't want Israel to become a binational state. I do want a Jewish state. I do want a democracy. That requires separation from the Palestinians. Can't do it now, but that needs to be the course to which we are committed, with lots of reservations and caveats and concerns and so on. And that's what I think some in the international community are re-emphasizing.
One of the things that Netanyahu seems to be emphasizing beyond the points that you made is the concept that it would be a demilitarized Palestinian state, that there will be no military force in the area west of the Jordan except for the IDF. Is that something that can be accepted internationally?
Look, there is a model for statehood. The model for sovereignty that is the norm globally is problematic for Israel because we are a very small country and we are on the western edge of a potentially, and in many cases actual, hostile landmass. And we are concerned that if we relinquish territory, that dangerous forces will fill any vacuum. And I would say it's become more complicated because the region has become so unpredictable. You used to say, is there someone with whom we can do a deal and are we prepared to pay the price? Now you have to ask if the someone is still going to be there next week, next month, next year, next decade. And therefore the Netanyahu concern about ensuring that things don't change for the worst in territory we relinquish is a completely legitimate concern. We left southern Lebanon, Hezbollah took over. We left Gaza, Hamas took over. If we were to leave the West Bank, the biblical Judea and Samaria, who can guarantee for us that forces bent on our destruction will not take over? And therefore, Netanyahu's caveats saying, it's going to have to be something other than full globally understood sovereignty. It needs to be demilitarized. There's going to need to be other precautions that we need to take. I think is an argument he can make very effectively. I think he harms the argument when he doesn't acknowledge there needs to be some kind of two-state solution and then imposes caveats. That's been the path that he has taken. But I think that the international community, if it is genuinely committed to Israel's continued well-being and the opportunity for Palestinian independence, it can be explained, and they would have some sympathy for the notion of statehood minus some kind of model that is not the norm, because our reality in this part of the world is not the norm. There are particular dangers. Experience has shown some of those dangers. That's the parameters in which I would have thought there would be room for maneuver. A Palestinian leadership that says, no, we insist on full sovereignty, we will build any kind of army we want, we make no concessions to the notion of Israel's vulnerability, well, then we're not going to be able to make peace with them. We haven't been able to make peace with them because, for example, in the negotiating rooms, they've never relinquished the quote-unquote right of return. The formal Palestinian position remains that millions of second, third, and fourth generation descendants of the few 100,000 people who used to live in what is today Israel and who fled or were forced to leave, that they should have the right to come back to Israel. Well, that's the end of Israel as a Jewish state. They've taken positions that have prevented us from achieving a deal. But I think Israel's saying, look, we want this partnership. We don't think it's simple. There are going to need to be caveats. I think that's a realistic and a reasonable position. It needs to be explained effectively.